Today we're going to go through the process of replacing a motor on a Hoover WindTunnel vacuum. This particular vacuum is about 14 years old. I bought it in about 2002 and the motor has finally given out on it, and we'll go through the process on that. I purchased the motor from an online website called Vacuum Parts Warehouse, and I'll give you that information later on. What I want to do is remove the dust cup. That's easy to do. Remove the dust cup, get rid of it for a while. We're going to turn the vacuum over on its back side and remove these 4 screws here near the beater brush. Put that aside. Keep the screws in it, that way you'll remember where they go. Remove the belt and the beater brush. This belt's kind of hard to get out sometimes. You have to just kind of flip it through there. Okay. Remove this piece of plastic out of this tray out of here. There's 2 screws, one here and there's one underneath this roller. Remove these 2 screws. And you could flip it over if you wanted to make it easier, but then the screws are going to fall. So this just takes that piece off. Gives you access to the motor. Remove the hose section from the base by removing these 2 screws. To remove the hose, we can remove the bottom section of the vacuum cleaner from the top section and get to the housing which holds the motor. On its front side again, and lay it flat as best you can, and let me reposition this a little bit. Say when you remove these brackets that hold the motor housing on, there's an inside and outside to these brackets. So make sure you mark them, either put a little nick on the outside of them the way they are right now before you remove them, so that when you put them back in you won't reverse them. So again, there's an inside and outside to both of these brackets on both sides. So make sure that you have them in the correct position when you put them back in. 2 screws. That releases the one side. And then I'm going to release the other side too. I use the manual screwdriver for it. That's the other half. This just slides out, goes in with the cylinder that comes out of the motor, and it just slides in there first and then drops into both sides when you put it back in. So you put this end in first and then work it back into the slot. That's all it does right there. Alright, and release it again. Okay, and drop that out. Now I got the motor assembly out from the base. The 2 screws from the light. take that, put it aside. Next thing we're going to do is going to turn it over and replace this, remove the screw that is right here. It's going to hold this piece on right here. There's one screw holding the top of this off, pulling this on. There you go. Now on the front here, there's two little tabs that hold this on here. You'll see them. There's two little tabs on both sides where these holes go into. So keep that in mind when you put it back on. Got to put it back on the tabs first and then put the screw on. To get the motor out of the assembly, there's 3 screws that hold the motor in place in this case. One is right here, one is right here, and then there's one in the back right here. You'll see them. So 3 screws need to be removed. When you take the motor out of this assembly, you know there's a spring here that's in the inside of this circular connection. This is what holds the vacuum upright, and when you release it, it puts tension on the top part, so when you pull it back it locks in place. So just keep a note as the position of where this spring is, and as you can see the little pointy end is pointing out to the top of the vacuum handle, so it has to be in that position, so keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to remove the screws now. Remove this completely because the wires that are providing the power for the motor are actually connected in here. I have it just partially connected because I already disassembled it once, and I'm going through it again to show the process. So you can just lay this to the side a little bit to start, and then we'll talk about this motor and the connections on it. Okay, this is where we come into the nitty-gritty part of the job here. The first thing I like to do when I do anything like this is to take a picture so I don't forget how these wires are connected. So in this case, you got the red wire on the top left side of the motor. There's a black wire on the right side, and then a white wire at the bottom there. Okay, and it's kind of in there at the bottom here. So take a picture so you know how to hook up the new one. Now with this motor, there's 2 terminals at the top orientated and one at the bottom on the bottom right, which you can't see in here because I can't get the motor out. I guess I could lift it up here a little bit, but you'll see there's the bottom one, if I can show it right there. Alright, and then you got one at the top right and one at the left. When I replace this motor, I'm going to orientate the new motor in the same position as the old motor. Okay, so I have 2 terminals on the top, one on the left here, one on the right, and one on the bottom right. So you want to make sure that the new motor is orientated in the same position. To make it easier to remove these wires, you can basically pull the motor out of the housing for it and give you a little bit more access to the connections. So like I said, there's 3 of them there. Just remove them. You might want to use some long nose pliers to pull these off. They're kind of on there tight. So either use your hands or use a pair of long nose pliers. Motor, the old motor has 2 pieces that we want to remove so we can put on the new motor. There's a kind of a foam piece that's on the back part of the motor. Remove that, and there's also a rubber piece on the front. Remove that, and we're going to take these off the old motor and put them on the new motor. So this rubber piece here that goes on the front of the motor has a little tabs in there. Make sure that you line those tabs up on the shaft of the motor. Alright, so it fits in there perfectly. Okay, now we're just going to hook the wires back up just as they were before, and it's easier to do it while it's not sitting inside the housing. So I just kind of, first one I did was the black lead because it's the shortest. Actually, not the black lead. I did the other two first, and then the black lead last because it's the shortest one. Yeah, I just put all the wires back, and I put the motor into the housing. As you can see here, those slots line up with the slots in the plastic. Make sure they're all lined up, and then I'm going to put the top part of the motor housing in there, and then line up those tabs and then screw everything back together. Okay, put all the screws back in. The motor is inside the housing, and this rubber piece, when you screw it, make sure this is not sticking out and is actually recessed like it is on mine. If you want, it probably would be a good idea to make sure it's working, is plug the vacuum in and turn it on, make sure the motor is running. Put the tension spring back in. Start it up with this thing facing up, with this tab facing upward, and put it in there, and then slide it around until it engages. And then the piece, as I said before, this little part of it will be facing up toward the handle. Time to put the motor housing back into the base. So you want to start with the motor shaft and face it downward toward the opening, and then if you want, you can pull this little tensioner there, get that facing in there flush like that, and then you're ready to go. We're ready to put those screws back on to hold the motor housing in place. Next, we're going to replace the piece of green plastic that goes over the front of the top part of the vacuum cleaner. So remember, I told you there's some tabs in here. Fit the plastic piece over the tabs first, and then they'll click down over them, and then reverse the vacuum cleaner, and then put that one screw that you have there for it. So I'll just put that screw in. Put it on its back and put the hose bracket back onto the back here. Just got to hold that down with your thumb and then tighten it up. Make sure that hose is seated into the top part. I'm going to put the top part of the housing for the beater brush, the bottom piece. Put it back on. It just sits on top of there. Of course, the screws that hold it are on the back side, so you're going to flip it over. They don't want to fall off, so you might have to get someone to help you do that. Again, the screws are back here, right? So we got to start those. If you have one of those screwdrivers that holds the screw, it's a heck of a lot easier than trying to use your hands like I'm doing here. So Start those up. Alright. So get those screws back in. You can hold this piece up here if you want. It makes it a lot easier. Don't pull it up too high, it'll come off. Once you get the one on the one side, the other one's a lot easier. We're ready to put the beater brush back in. Put the first housing back in. Slip the bout around the beater brush. Now this is the hard part, it's just getting this bout in there. So actually it's probably easier to put the bout in first and then the beater brush. So I slide that out on its edge first. Get that in there. Okay, now the bout's there. Slide the beater brush in there over the pulley and then pull it and work it into the slots here on both sides. Not always easy to do, but we've got one in. And two in there. And they only go in one way, so you don't have to worry about screwing that up. There's slots in there that hold the beater brush in place. Next thing is to put the cover back on over the beater brush. The easiest way to do is to take the front part of it and put it at an angle, slide it in there, and then pull it back to the back part of the vacuum cleaner. These little edges will be flush against the top piece, and then you can put your 4 screws in there, tighten it down. I always like to hand tighten them with a regular screwdriver because you just don't get an idea of the torque you're putting on the screw with these power screwdrivers. Optionally, there's a filter that protects the motor and keeps any dust from getting into the motor here. Probably a good idea to replace this filter as well. There's just one Phillips screw holding it on, so just remove that Phillips screw and remove the filter for it, and then put the new one in. Put the new one in and then screw this cover plate back over it. If you want, you could wipe everything down, get the dust off the inside. Up to you. I probably will do that. Okay, at least on this unit my bulb was also burnt out, so I bought some new bulbs. You can buy them at any auto parts store or at Walmart or any hardware store probably as well. The number on it's 912. And it just slides into the socket there, so I'm going to replace it as well and then put the cover back on. Not much involved in that. Just screw the cover back in. That completes the video on how to replace a motor on a Hoover WindTunnel vacuum cleaner. I also have a video on how to replace the extension cord on the Hoover wind tunnel vacuum. If you have any comments, please leave them on YouTube. Thanks. Parts were ordered from partswarehouse.com.